Welcome, Gaye. Thank you for coming. My name is Ashley, and I'm here to do an interview with you on your personal opinion around wellness. And this is part of the wellness campaign being held through the Yukon government. So why don't we start off with a little bit of background about who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, well, I'm a long-time Yukoner. I moved here from Alberta in 1990, so I've been here for many years and started working for Yukon government till about 1994, and then I've been in my own private consulting business since. I'm a nurse and a public administrator, so a degree in nursing, master's in public admin. So my daughter was 2.5 when we moved, and she went through all of her schooling here in French immersion and had a wonderful education, and then was launched into university in Saskatchewan. Yeah, and good roots in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. My background is part Cree from northern Manitoba. And so it's been interesting to be an Indigenous person in Yukon during the negotiation of land claims and self-government agreements, and to have those sensibilities and sensitivities, but not being Yukon First Nation.
Yep.
And so it's been a wonderful run and not over yet.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of running left to do.
Yes.
Where in Alberta did you come from?
So I'd moved in from Edmonton. I was working for the federal government there.
Okay. Awesome. All my family lives in Alberta, mostly Peace Country area.
Yeah, well, I spent 9 months in Grand Prairie in grade 3.
That's where I went to high school, is Grand Prairie.
Yeah, lovely community.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. What do you love about living in the Yukon?
The land and the people. So the land is wonderful. It's so inspiring. And as much as I'm a bush girl and a prairie girl in terms of my roots, the mountains have always called to me. And I was a downhill skier in my early years. And every time I left the mountains in Alberta to go back to Saskatchewan, there was this sadness of literally longing and grieving of leaving the mountains. So I always knew that was land that called me. And then I just love the outdoor life and the people that live the life, the variety of people in Yukon, and just the way in which we create Yukon family in terms of really deep and enduring friendships. So even though I haven't had family here, in terms of extended family, I've really made some wonderful connections. And then there's a permission in the Yukon to be whatever you want. So I'm an ex-deputy minister that has a shamanic healing and drumming practice, and everybody thinks that's okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're lucky enough to be here that we have the space to be individuals. Yeah, which not necessarily people in big cities and overpopulated places have that option.
That's right. That's right.
That's beautiful. What does wellness mean to you?
So I always think of wellness in 4 aspects in terms of personal wellness, and that is the emotional and spiritual and physical and intellectual or mental learning part of health. And so I always think of it in sort of a holistic sense of how am I doing in each of those domains or those dimensions, and trying to find some balance. And so I've always been very active intellectually in my learning and my working with my mind, and spiritually very expansive, but I have to work to keep up physically and emotionally sometimes, because those are the parts that I leave behind when my life is running too fast. And then I go into the next piece around family and community, and that's all about connections, and it's connections to people who hold my values, and that we enjoy doing things together, that we love just hanging out and indoors or outdoors or on some sort of an adventure. And I still am very connected to my daughter who lives in Edmonton, and she's got 2 children now, 4 and 7, and a husband, and very much involved with their lives. I've got 3 sisters, and we just lost our parents over the last few years that were in Saskatchewan. But they lived till long and rich lives, and so it wasn't, they weren't early deaths. My mother died at almost 94. So she was a wonderful role model for just vim, vigor, and vitality. And she was golfing, I think, till she was 88 or something, and took great offense to when she had to start riding a cart, but never gave in to golfing 9 holes. It was 18 holes until she quit. So that sense of dedication to living and to people and to connections is sort of all part of it for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. In what ways does living here in the Yukon help you with your wellness and wellness goals?
Well, just the outdoors is so accessible. It's different now than it was 30 years ago in terms of my ability to access the outdoors. So I just access it differently. Similarly with people, there's lots to do in terms of the creative arts and performance and music. And there's a richness of the culture here that really feeds my soul.
Beautiful. That's self-expression, right?
And just like I've never been terribly creative outside of writing, I suppose, but to watch a musician in action or a good play is something that really inspires me. And again, we have such a rich diversity of talents in Yukon. I just love to see that and celebrate it. So that was, something that kind of got shut down during COVID and starting to open up. So things like, our concerts in the park and some of those outdoor events. I get excited about having an in-person meeting.
Yeah, that too.
'Cause I'm
sharing energy in person.
Oh, well, and I'm a real extrovert, so that all the distant stuff, it was difficult for sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that you were aware of that. And that you're aware of your needs and that you need to connect with your community. Sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Out of those three, which do you think you excel at the most?
Probably sleep. I've always been a good sleeper, and I think it goes back to being a bush nurse for years and having to sleep whenever I could. And there were times, months on end, that I was a solo nurse serving 3 or 4 communities. So whether it was 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, I had to sleep when I could sleep. And so I still, am able to sleep well. And I think usually fairly good with nutrition, and I just love the fact that I've got people who show up on my doorstep with wild meat in both pockets, and then just the accessibility of healthy food, which is much better now in Yukon than it was when I first came up here. Like trying to get a decent head of lettuce back in the early 90s was like a scavenger hunt.
Or like the options of fruit I had.
Oh, yeah. So it's really improved, and particularly around fresh produce, and I have a lot of friends in my life that eat gluten-free and that are vegan or vegetarian, and so that gives me a sensibility around I don't use flour products in my kitchen because I've got so many people through the house that have sensitivities. So that keeps me in line too in terms of bringing home stuff that I don't necessarily need to eat. Yeah, and then exercise as I've aged has taken on a different flavor. And now my exercise program right now is cooking, cleaning, taking kids to daycare and school, and chasing grandchildren. But it's been an imposed post-COVID fitness program that's actually working.
That's good, keeping you active, right?
Absolutely, because I have no choice.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any one of these of the three that you find the most challenging?
Well, I think exercise, because I do have arthritic knees, and so much exercise is weight-bearing lower body, and particularly the things I used to love to do, like cycling and that sort of thing. I was even a runner at one time, and so just finding things that are more appropriate to the age and stage of my body. And so the latest thing, my daughter is in stroke recovery, and so we're going to try water aerobics, or aquasize, or whatever you call it. And she's now safe in the pool, and it used to be something I really enjoyed doing, is swimming. So there's always new things to try, and it has been good to come out of the doldrums of COVID and start, rebuilding some of the physical fitness.
That's good. And adapting to
for sure.
Why is being on the land important to you?
I feel very clear, I guess it's an emotional, spiritual experience, just literally to commune with the land and to spend time connecting with the land, and that can be flat in my back in the forest, or it can be doing some activity. The Japanese have a notion of nature bathing, and they actually say that you need stillness. You need to actually stop and be in nature in order to really draw in the energy and the healing properties of nature. And I've done a lot of work in land-based healing, and I've seen the power of the land and the relationship with the land be able to help in recovery from trauma and recovery from addictions. And so I think it's a powerful ally, and I think of it as an ally that kind of walks with me and is there for me, whether it's just looking at a beautiful view, or whether it's actually being outdoors and involved in some activity, including just hanging out.
Yeah, I love that, thinking of the nature as being an ally. That you can depend on and trust to be there for you, especially living here, right? That's amazing.
And I wish I remember the source of this quote, but it talks about a land that remembers you. So it isn't just that you remember the land, but that the land actually remembers you and has is an active sort of participant in your healing and in your relational well-being. And I truly believe that connecting with nature allows us to connect with our own nature, that outer nature tells us something about our inner nature, and it slows us down. I don't think physically physiologically that we're built for being connected to media all the time, where we are built for thousands of years being connected to nature. So to me, it's a bit of an antidote to the speed and the pressures, phone and internet and computer world.
Do you have a favorite way to spend time in nature?
I have friends that have a trap line down the south end of Tagish Lake.
Ooh.
And so it's been a few years since I've been down there, but my absolute favorite place. And it's because there's a road trip and then a boat trip. And then you're there. So it's a 2-hour boat trip. So you're a long way down, close to Ben Cree. And then when I'm there, I'm in a wall tent, and there's a little stove and a fire, and right next to the creek and near the lake. So you can hear the creek, you can hear the lake, even when you're sleeping and you wake up in the night. Oh, this is where I am. I remember this now. And so there's something about raw, open wilderness that is just, it's even more powerful than kind of semi-occupied land.
Yep. And then you're fully immersed in it.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy to get out of the land because, like you said, it's a drive and a boat ride. So,
yeah. And you know that you're a long way away from people, and that's a good thing. And I'm never down there alone. I'm with others. But there's a community, too, that when you're spending time in wilderness together with a few people, there's a quality of your shared experience, just sitting around the fire or preparing meals or trying to have a bath in very cold water with a teaspoon from the lake.
Yes, teaspoon baths.
Yeah.
Yes. We know everyday choices can help keep us well. What are choices you make on a daily basis consciously to help keep you well?
Well, I do try and keep myself in the center of my own life. And so the picture there is when life goes sort of sideways, there's this sort of tornado, and you just get caught up in your own tornado and really lose self-awareness, lose perspective, and lose the kind of navigational aids. And so I've just been through a period of time like that. And I'm just slowly kind of climbing back into the center of my own life and into that peaceful place that allows for self-awareness and allows for tuning into what are my needs now before everything went sideways. Like, what are my needs and what is it going to take to actually meet those needs for nutrition, for exercise, for rest, but also for social connection and inspiration and finding ways of keeping my mind active and occupied, and all of those different things that I know help to keep me well.
Why is it important to you to protect your health and the health of others?
Well, to me, protecting my own health is my own decision in terms of what choices I make to do that. And coming from a nursing background, I have all of that knowledge that sometimes is good, and sometimes it gives you more to worry about because you understand things. And when you start getting to my age, which is kind of pushing 70, then you sort of think about aging and think about, if I hadn't been such an aggressive downhill skier, maybe my knees wouldn't be as arthritic, So I had a friend of mine that used to say, if I knew that I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. Yeah. And but the reality is we are the sum choices of our genetics, our choices, and all of the rest of it. It really is about accepting the reality of, here's what the current health status is and what is it that I can do to improve that. And I use a lot of complementary and alternative therapies and sort of supplements and different things alongside mainstream medicine. Okay. And that combination works for me.
Oh, that's good. So you walk kind of in both worlds with the traditional knowledge and medicines and then the Western scientific side. And as much as my background is Cree, and my grandmother was a traditional midwife and healer, she was also a good Anglican and didn't share a lot of that knowledge. So the complementary and alternative work that I do in shamanism, or that I tap into, is more complementary than it is cultural. And so I make the differentiation between what I do, for example, for myself and for others as a shamanic practitioner, as opposed to a traditional person walking a traditional path in a traditional apprenticeship. Okay, wonderful. What would you say to somebody who doesn't want to miss work or a special event or something exciting because they're sick or ill.
That's where our social responsibility comes in terms of protecting other people. And I think that I have a responsibility to keep my germs to myself, frankly, and including keeping my bad moods to myself. Like I've said to somebody the other day, I should have a T-shirt that says "not fit for human consumption." That there are days that really we're not necessarily positivity and light in the world, and so I try and just as I try and protect people from those places emotionally, physically, it's not up to me to decide whether or not I should put someone at risk. And sometimes we do that unintentionally, but it's just like we drive responsibly because we not only are responsible for the people in our vehicle, we're responsible for every other vehicle on the road. And so to me, those choices are about protecting others. And at the time that COVID hit, I was still visiting my 94-year-old mother, for example, and I didn't fly to see her for a year and a half because of risk that I would have brought to her. So it was one of those things of, I think it was the first Christmas I still had tickets to go to Saskatoon to see her, and she was like the queen of Christmas, and Christmas was mandatory. And it's like, should I actually put her at risk that she died of Christmas? Am I that reckless in terms of our health and well-being? Because there was much that we didn't know. I think that probably was Christmas 2021. I think we do have a responsibility for others. And another example would be secondhand smoke. If we're in a small space and if I'm a smoker, I have to be concerned about the smoke that I'm inhaling, but also that I'm creating a situation where you have no choice but to breathe, and you're breathing my secondhand smoke. So I have responsibility for both.
Okay, well that's very thoughtful of you to be able to see that and to be self-aware enough to say, I'm having an off day, I am toxic to the environment, let's just stay home today kind of
That's
thing.
right.
Or minimize interactions with people today because I am not up for it.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. As opposed to, who can I take it out on?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. We hear a lot these days about staying home if we're sick. How can we make that easier for people to do?
There's two aspects of that, and one is that you're going to get better faster and more likely to get really well and not end up with some kind of chronic condition if you actually allow your body to heal. And it's the best medicine for many, not all illnesses, but a lot of illnesses. And similarly with injury, like we have this crazy society that says, well, you sprained your ankle, go out and walk on it, and it's like, that's not what your body needs. And if you're listening to your body will tell you. But also the responsibility that we have not to be taking whatever we have and spreading it to others, and to recognize that not everyone has the same level of immunity that we have, that there are some very, very vulnerable people, that something that would give me, a cough and a sneeze could kill someone else. So again, as a nurse and as just an ethical person living my life in the best way I can, it's that sense of I have to be concerned about the community, that we're all in this together, and we have to do our best to protect each other.
And when we're all part of a community, if one part gets sick, then the community itself is weaker, right?
Absolutely.
When you're washing your hands, do you sing a song in your head, or do you have any little rituals to make those mundane tasks of constantly sanitizing just a little bit more enjoyable or natural part of your day?
Well, and I am a hand washer, and it's built right into me, particularly as a nurse. And I don't sing a song. My daughter taught me a long time ago that my voice is not even for consumption for her. And as a young child, she would throw her hands over her ears and say, "Mommy, please stop."
So no songs singing?
No songs, no.
I like to keep a collection of scented lotions all over the house because my hands get so dry. So I'm like, oh, well, if I use scented lotions, then doesn't bother me, because then I'm like, they smell so good right now.
Absolutely.
Is there somewhere you routinely go that you wear a mask?
Well, and it's sort of changed recently, but usually grocery stores, and partly because I don't know who's there and what I might be bringing. It's lots of different people. Certainly in airports and on planes, it's regulated, but I would do that anyway. If I'm in a hospital, or in the case of my daughter, she's in an outpatient in rehab. So if I'm in the rehab hospital, I'm also wearing a mask. So it's mainly healthcare settings, airports and transportation and grocery stores. And I don't do a lot of other shopping other than groceries, but I think if I was in Walmart, I'd probably do the same.
Yeah. And so is that a personal choice or required?
Oh, well, it's required for the airlines, for flying in airports. And I think certainly, like when I was at the hospital for blood work the other day, it was mandatory to have the mask, which I totally am in support of. And again, I mean, you're there for blood work with a bunch of people that are on chemo and have all kinds of different, compromised immunity. And so a small act of wearing a mask protects me and someone else. Why wouldn't I do it? But I'm also relieved that it's not everywhere. And this winter, I was dropping my youngest grandchild off at daycare, and it was like, oh, okay, put the mask on. And again, you're in a daycare, which is like a petri dish of infection, and it probably saved me illness more than me transmitting illness to someone else.
That is so true. So let's talk about the shot. Why was getting it important to you?
Well, my background is in public health, so I'm a great believer in immunization. I'm an international traveler, so I've been immunized for all kinds of exotic things that I can't even remember now what they were. And so I'm a believer in it. But I also did my research, and I wanted to be clear. I have a history of pneumonia, so I have, an extra added respiratory risk. And so it just made sense to me to be immunized. And I had other friends that made other choices, and I tried to understand those choices. And my communication with them is that I respect your choice, I honor your choice, and I really appreciate you letting me know what choice you've made so that I can assess that risk. Because I did have one friend that was unimmunized that I ended up setting up a sale of a guitar between her and a woman who was dying of cancer. And I didn't know she was unimmunized. And she actually went and she tried out the guitar and sang for my friend, which is a beautiful act. But in that case, that could have killed her. And so it's just one of those things that we have a responsibility to let people know if we've made a choice that could change the risk calculation that you might make for yourself, but also when you're kind of connecting friends and you don't know the whole story and you make assumptions, which I made, and it was not the right assumption. And thankfully it was all fine. And I think the songs were as healing as a vaccine would have been for my other friend. But it worried me because I had been, unknowingly participating in something that could have caused risk to someone else because I just didn't know the story. So that's all I've asked of my friends is that they just let me know so that I can then calculate the risk to me and the risk to anyone else. Yeah, and we had a small gathering of 6 or 7 people last night at my house, and none of us wore masks. But if we'd known that half the group was unvaccinated or immune compromised, we would have made another choice as a group.
What would you say to encourage others to keep their vaccinations up to date?
Well, I had a friend in her 40s that died unexpectedly of H1N1, and I didn't even know she was gone until I was asked to participate in her funeral. And it was out of the blue, no underlying conditions. I think she was 43. And so if there's a way in we can protect ourselves and our loved ones, then we need to do that. No intervention like that is without risk. But my belief is that the protection is worth the risk.
How do you prefer to stay digitally connected to friends and family?
So I do have a computer, a laptop that I carry with me. That is on when I need it to be on, and that works for me. And then I have just upgraded from a BlackBerry because they stopped servicing them, which I was so heartbroken about, to an iPhone. And I'm with my daughter's family, they're all iPhone users. So it's been really helpful to be able to share lists and share contacts and stuff. So I'm slowly kind of learning the digital world. But I do turn my phone off at night unless, I'm on call or something like that. I check messages, but rarely. I'm not working as actively as I once did, so there isn't as much obligation. And I do, most of my friends know that if there's an urgent email to also text me so that there's a bit of a signal there. Yeah. So I really tried, and I don't, I'm not watching as much TV as I once did, and I'm really trying to consume digital media, whether it's YouTube or whether it's phone or computer, sort of just more consciously, because I did sort of in the early days of COVID went down a rabbit hole of American news, and it was just devastating to my mental health and my physical health. Like there was just something, and I thankfully pulled out of the nosedive because it really wasn't affecting me in a good way. And I know people, like I have one sister that spends hours watching American TV, and or American news specifically. And I just think that we have to be conscious of what we see and how it affects us. And I remember turning on the TV on 9/11, and those images will be with me for the rest of my life, and particularly because they were just shown over and over and over again.
Yeah, that repetition.
Yeah,
so
but
it's almost like that digital consumption can affect you just as much as like food consumption.
Oh, absolutely. And some of it is very positive and some of it is very toxic. Yeah. And I do have a YouTube subscription, and I love to consume, health-oriented information and spiritual information. And it's an incredible repository of inspirational content if we reach out for that kind of content. But if we just kind of mindlessly consume, cop shows and American news, then it is toxic. I really do believe it is, and I feel that I need to stay in touch, but I do try and limit how much, because I think an hour of the National, I can consume that and I can keep my balance, but 2 or 3 hours of news in a day is just too much, and particularly being that most of it's bad news, and yeah.
So it's that self-awareness again, and where your limits are and boundaries are, right?
And to also know that I want to live my life not as defended as I once did, with a lot of filters and defense mechanisms, and I was living an executive life in a challenging world, and so I needed all of those defenses, but I don't need them anymore, and I don't want to live inside a defended bubble. And so if I want to live more open-hearted, it means I have to be careful about the people, about the content, about the connections that I make in my life, and how it affects me differently, rather than just rebuilding defenses.
Where do you think we go from in here in terms of looking out for our wellness?
It was so funny because the first part of that question, I thought it was the esoteric question of where do we go after we're done, right? And I guess I'm just surrounded by a lot of end of life and palliative care issues and stuff. But in terms of wellness, I think part of what we have to do is to rethink all of the different pieces. And for example, a friend of mine just supported his mother through dementia. And I said, well, everything I've read about dementia, I need to keep working to keep stimulated in order to not end up with dementia. And my father died with dementia, so it's in the gene pool. And he said, no, the latest, it's all about social connection, and it's all about people and the quality of social connection. And yeah, it's a good idea to do a crossword once in a while, but the research has really changed a lot. And I said, oh, good, I got that one covered. And so I don't have to work for the rest of my life to not have dementia. So I think we need to understand what the research is telling us, and we need to understand what that means to us in terms of our own quality of life, because each of us have our own individual path. And it's so important not to get trapped into the old health promotion thinking that somehow if we take care of those 3 dimensions you mentioned, somehow we're done, right? Yeah. And it is much bigger than that, and that's why I actually like the notion of well-being more so than wellness, which has become, it means everything and nothing now, and well-being has many more dimensions, and it things like cultural identity in an Indigenous notion of well-being, it matters, and it's accounted, as well as the quality of connections and some of those things, and even livelihood, and how do we find purpose in life.
That concludes our interview. Thank you very much for coming here. I'm glad that you got to share your voice. Your voice matters, and I'm sure that you'll connect with a lot of people who can relate to your story in some way. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your opinions with us.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.